Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Edwards, and I'm the Community Events Manager here at Linux Professional Institute. This webinar is part of the LPI Product Update Series, and the Product Update Series communicates important information about products offered by Linux Professional Institute. It focuses on the most important aspects of new products and common misconceptions regarding existing products. During this webinar, feel free to write any questions in the chat and the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I will keep track and facilitate those throughout the webinar. Today's webinar will be led by Markus Wirtz, the Manager of Education Programs here at Linux Professional Institute. So Markus, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you very much, Caitlin, for the introduction and especially for organizing this series of webinars. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation of Linux Professional Institute's Learning Materials project. First of all, I'm really overwhelmed by how many participants have gathered here now. Thank you very much for attending and being here, and I hope we can answer all open questions in the next about 60 minutes. Allow me to first introduce myself briefly. My name is Markus Wirtz, and I have been working as Manager of Education Programs for LPI since the end of 2018. Before that, I worked at SUSE in Germany and then spent 15 years managing my own IT publishing house in Munich, so I'm very glad and thankful to be able to manage the Learning Materials project now as a kind of in-house publisher for LPI. I have prepared this webinar as a presentation, but would also be happy if this meeting would develop into a discussion. That means if you have any questions, as Caitlin says, please ask them directly in the chat. Caitlin will then take over the moderation. I will gladly try to answer as many questions as possible. Of course, you will also have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the meeting if there are any outstanding issues or if I have forgotten anything. A few weeks ago, I was already able to present our project to some LPI partners in an internal webinar, but the idea to do this in this open round has now made me change the thing a little bit and set other priorities. And that brings me straight to the two concerns that this webinar has. First of all, it is a matter of presenting the project and making it known, of course, especially to teachers and learners of LPI exams. But it is equally important to us to make the open approach of the project clear. That is, to explain how it works behind the scenes and thus to attract new contributors. More on that in a moment. For general understanding, the learning materials are the starting point and currently the central component of our education program. We have further plans for the future, but first we need to expand the learning materials and make them a broad foundation for upcoming initiatives. As an example, we have also already implemented the LPI Publishing Partner Program, because it is important to us that our own work on publications is done in good cooperation with other publishers or other platforms. This program gives publishers the opportunity to present themselves and their LPI relevant products on our dedicated website, learning.lpi.org, which I will show you later. They also have the option of having their publications reviewed by LPI and certified as so-called approved training material. When we talk about our website later, we will also take a brief look at this section. However, this webinar is about the structure, use, and development of our learning materials. Therefore, a short overview of what I would like to present today. We start with the motivation behind the learning materials. That is the question, why is LPI now developing its own learning materials and what is the motivation behind them? In connection with the didactic concept, I will explain for whom we develop the learning materials and what effects this decision has on the structure. This is therefore primarily a matter of conceptual decisions that had to be made in advance for the entire series of learning materials. How this is reflected in the concrete text, we will look later at directly on the website as well as in the sources. Under the item current status, I will give you an overview of the status quo of the project, what we have achieved and in which dimensions are we moving. Here too, We look from two angles, namely from the candidate's perspective, in other words, what materials and what translations are already available, but also from the point of view of potential contributors. So which tasks are currently in the pipeline? How can I contribute my expertise? Then we will look at the concrete implementation of all this on learning.lpi.org, the central website of the project, and what can be found there. It is, of course, a statement that the project maintains a separate website, so we want to explain why this is so. I will switch to the website then, so that you can see the most important areas live. And of course, we also take a close look at the lessons and their structure, the materials already available, and their translations. In the section Technical Infrastructure and Contributions, we will look behind the scenes. That is how the learning materials are created. This is important because it helps us to clarify the conditions under which we look for further helpers. Here I switch to my own working environment and show you the most important tools and work steps. These are mostly the same for authors, reviewers, and translators. So if you're thinking of getting involved in the project, you will get a concrete impression of the processes here. While the focus up to now has been on the concept and what we have done so far, the next steps describe what we have planned for the near future and what we have already started. And finally, help sums up the shortest way to us for all those who would like to participate in the project in some way. And of course, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, which I hope I can answer. So what is our motivation? Why are we doing all this, and what result do we have in mind? Simply put, everyone who prepares themselves or others, for example, training and academic partners, for LPI exams should have access to learning materials, and we want to make them available. LPI's deep roots in the open source community meant that important requirements for the materials were already apparent at the design stage, like the following. It is a community project in the sense that generally anyone who's able to and who wants to can participate. Apart from a few colleagues and myself who take care of the project at LPI, there is no permanent team, but only free contributors who can join according to their free time, desire, and expertise. And of course, depending on the need that exists. The materials should then be free for non-commercial use, but LPI takes over the organization and coordination. We want to ensure high and consistent quality, as well as prevent misuse by third parties. This in turn has an impact on the development and publishing process. That is, LPI concludes contracts with the contributors, thereby securing, for example, the exploitation rights to the texts. This is the only way we can consistently implement the stated goals. We have opted for the non-commercial and no derivative versions of the Creative Commons license. Thus, there is no possibility of unauthorized editions or translations circulating, and in the worst case, damaging the reputation of the entire project. A further requirement for the learning materials was they should always be up to date. We therefore decided to use the rolling release principle, which is known from software development. This means that finished parts and improvements are published continuously. This decision in turn places high demands on the entire process of writing and publishing. More on this later. And next, the materials should be easily usable worldwide. In addition to the original English version, we also work on as many translations as possible from the beginning. And this also had to be taken into account when setting up an efficient tool chain. With regard to the target group, respectively the use of the materials, there occurred further criteria important to us. No equipment other than any Linux system is required for working with the learning materials. And that is just to be able to understand the explanations and examples. In fact, you can work through them without a computer even. The formal structure should be suitable both for teaching and for self-study. We speak here of a classroom-ready structure. We'll look at it in detail later. In this way, the learning materials support the work of teachers and trainers, both in the academic and in the business training area. How the result looks like in practice, I would like to show you later directly on the project website. Let us first take a look at how we have implemented the aforementioned requirements and what effects they have on the didactic concept and the structure of the materials. The question of the didactic concept and the structure of the learning materials is, first of all, who are they actually intended for and who should use them and in what context? We want to reach as large as possible and as many target groups as possible, from self-study to use in groups and classrooms. The learning materials are also intended to support our academic partners and partners in the field of training. The design of the learning units is therefore also based on numerous discussions within LPI's Academic Advisory Board, and that gives me a good opportunity to thank the AAC for their support here. We are also pleased about a structure that has been co-developed by numerous teachers and professors from teaching practice. And this resulted in some principles for the conception. The structure of the learning materials follows exactly the current objectives of the respective exam, which can be seen, for example, on wiki.lpi.org. The single units, called lessons, all have the same structure and are designed for direct use in class, both in terms of their structure and their scope. And thus, an objective is divided into 1 to 3 lessons, whereby one such lesson corresponds to a teaching unit of 45 to 90 minutes, of course, depending on previous knowledge of the learners. The number of lessons per objective depends on the weight of the respective objective, as well as on the amount of knowledge to be taught. The weight is given by LPI for each objective, and the rule of thumb applies to the learning materials: 1 lesson per 2 points. This means, for example, an objective with a weight of 4 is dealt with in 2 lessons. And as already mentioned, technical independence and availability in many languages are also important. Let us take a brief look at the typical unit of our learning materials, the already mentioned lesson. Such a lesson always has the same 6-part structure, starting with the introduction, which explains all relevant examination contents in as concise a form as possible. It is important to limit the contents to the knowledge relevant to the respective exam. In contrast to a textbook, it is therefore not a matter of imparting necessary basic knowledge or further practical tips. The candidates should see and repeat what they need to know for the exam. And if they detect serious gaps here, they must close them with other sources. The theoretical explanations are followed by 2 blocks of tasks. The so-called guided exercises serve to test the knowledge acquired in the introduction. This means that each guided exercise can be solved solely with the knowledge imparted here. They can be used directly in class, but also for follow-up work at home or as a final check before the exam. The explorational exercises are different. Here, in addition to the facts conveyed in the introduction, further knowledge and thus research by the candidate may be necessary. For example, by looking at man pages or the website of a certain project. However, this is not about new concepts, but also about the topics from the introduction, only that the necessary and exam-relevant details are not explicitly mentioned there. This is about working according to the typical Linux principle, knowing where something is and finding it quickly. The 2 exercise blocks are followed by a short summary. This is followed by the solutions to the 2 exercises parts. This makes it clear that the learning materials are not textbooks, but rather learning sources designed for practical use in lessons which are intended both to impart the required knowledge and to check it directly. So here's a little step-by-step guide for using the learning materials. For example, in self-study, read the introduction carefully, and if necessary, consult external sources if you do not understand individual terms or described contexts. Follow all examples on your computer. That is, actually type the commands, the more often the better. This is the only way to really memorize the procedures for practical use. Then print out the guided exercises and try to solve them without any tools and without looking them up in the introduction. If this does not succeed, read the relevant sections in the introduction again. Check your answers using the answers to the guided exercises, and if you still made mistakes, refer again to the introduction. Now proceed to the explorational exercises, and if necessary, use, for example, main pages of the ask commands to solve the tasks. How you use the materials in class or implement the steps described above naturally depends very much on the teaching situation. However, the following general recommendations can be made. Do not distribute the introduction in advance, but work through the contents by means of clever question-answer situations or the presentation of practical scenarios with your learners. Make sure that the learners can follow the examples and ideally execute them on their own computers. And third, distribute the task initially without the answers, of course. If your courses are very heterogeneous, you can distribute guided and explorational exercises to participants with every different areas of expertise at the same time. So let's now take a brief look at what we have achieved so far with the processes and tools described. The website learning.lpi.org, that is not the materials but the website itself, is currently available in 5 languages. Everything I will show you later live on the website when switching to my web browser. We work together with about 30 contributors, authors, reviewers, and translators. About 80 lessons have been published so far, and these are based on about 43,000 lines of text in the Git repo with about 1,500 commits. And here's an overview of the respective exams. That is, Linux Essentials is complete and published. The same is true for LPIC 101. LPIC 102 will follow shortly. And the new exams like Security Essentials, Web Development Essentials, DevOps Tools Engineer, and BSD Specialist are already in preparation. And about the translation, which are...
Markus,
yes?
Sorry to interrupt there. Is there any current status for learning materials for LPIC 2?
Not yet, because,
okay.
because there will be an update of LPIC 2, I guess by the end of the year or beginning next year, I'm not quite sure. And this is the reason why we are not in development of the LPIC 2 materials at the moment. But it will be when the new version will come out.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, about the translation, that is Linux Essentials in German is complete and Spanish, Portuguese soon to be complete. And in preparation, Linux Essential is now Japanese, Korean, French, Italian, Hungarian, and French, I've written, okay. Oh yeah, and we now started Farsi a few days ago. LPIC 102 in Spanish is complete soon, and in preparation in German and Italian. So then let's have a look at the website itself. This is how it looks like. With learning.lpi.org, LPI has created a new and central point for exam preparation. And this dedicated website was necessary because with the help of the Hugo framework and Docker containers, the static page is rebuilt and published every time a change is made, even if it's just correcting a typo in a learning material. I would like to give you now a brief overview of the site and give you a practical impression of what I have told you so far. As already mentioned, we wanted the whole project to be multilingual right from the beginning. So currently, the site itself is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and German. More languages are in preparation. Please note that only materials that have already been translated in full or in part will be displayed in the respective language. To show you what I mean is, we have the English version here that is in the original language. All materials we are now working on are being displayed. When I switch to German, for example, you will see that only Linux Essentials is visible, just because here we are still working on the other translation. So if you're looking for what is available in general, that is in English, always switch to the English version. If you want to see what is in your language available, switch to the site and you get an impression. And here you can see also the principle of the rolling release I already talked about. We publish the finished lessons. If the learning material for an exam is complete, it loses this in development flag. That is, as soon as we have a new lesson for a respective material, it will be published. So beside our own materials, which we will look at it in a moment, candidates will also find a list of current materials from other providers. They are sorted here on all resources. Be they publishers, publishing platforms, or self-employed people. The already mentioned publishing partners also have the opportunity to present themselves and their publications here. So we are trying to keep this list up to date. We add all materials we know about, and we are very thankful for any hint on new materials we can add here. It may be for free or it may be commercial, it doesn't matter, because we don't sell the material here, but we just add a link to the source where you can buy or download or whatever this material. They are sorted by the recent versions of the respective exam, and we eliminated elder materials from deprecated exam versions. So now we finally have a look at our own material. Let us take Linux Essentials as an example. The structure is based on the respective learning objectives, as I said, and there are one or more lessons for each objective. All lessons have the same already described structure and approximately the same scope. So let's take one example. It doesn't matter which one. On the right, you see the topics, you see the objectives, and you see the lessons to this objective. At the beginning, we have this little table, which is quite helpful when you, for example, print out just one lesson. You always know where it belongs to. Followed by the introduction. That is the main part, the introducing part of every lesson, which provides all the content you have to know in that respective objective. It is followed by the guided exercises. It can be only 2, it can be 15. Without the answers, of course. The same is true for the explorational exercises. That is the ones you need some additional material if you don't know the answer directly. A short summary of what you have learned. And after that, the answers to the 2 exercises blocks, both the guided exercises and followed by the explorational exercises. So that's how the website and our own learning material looks like. And yeah, you can freely navigate throughout the system and get and go to the objective you're interested in. In the another important task of the website is bundling of all activities related to the learning materials project. That is, readers have the opportunity to give their feedback, for example, information about errors or inconsistency or whatever. And via learninglpi.org, we find new helpers for the project. This is why we set up these frequently asked questions, the general ones in regard to the whole project, with regard to the learning materials and to the publishing partner program. So we have definitely the most important ones, but if you think something is missing and should be explained right away on the website, let me know and we'll gladly add this question and answer to the list. Last but not least, the website is also a thank you to all contributors who present themselves here with a short CV and a photo. As you can see, the number is great and increasing. And so this is how the project currently looks for all visitors of the website. But as I said, we also want to take a look behind the scenes together, and it is important that the tools and work steps are the same for LPI team members and all other contributors. So what I want to show you later is not only my own working environment, but what every author, reviewer, or translator sees and uses in the same way. The only difference is that LPI reserves the right to decide on publication and contributions as part of the quality assurance process. Okay. So let's talk about the technical infrastructure and the contribution. I would like to split this part in two. First, I will give you a short overview of the tools we use, the most important work steps, and the role concept behind them. And then I will switch over to show you the most important things directly on my desktop. LPI's main task in the development of the learning materials include the provision of infrastructure, the coordination of the contributors, quality assurance, and publication and updating of the materials. Or in other words, everything except creating the content itself. It was clear from the beginning that the amount of exams and the number of planned translations would place enormous logistical demands on the project. Just to give you an impression, we are currently working on learning materials for 9 exams. And for Linux Essentials, for instance, there are translations in 10 languages in progress. Under the leadership of Fabian Thorns, LPI's Director of Product Development, we used the first few months of the project to define and to set up suitable infrastructure. Here is just a selection of the criteria that this tool chain had to meet. It had to be open source, of course. It should be available worldwide, and it should use the flattest possible, that is resource saving and easy to process formats. We then decided to use ASCII-Doc as markup for the source text that we manage in Git and GitLab. In this way, additional tasks like role and group management or bug fixing via issues and issue boards can be handled in one reliable tool. Due to the defined directory and file structure, the construction of our static project website can be carried out via the Hugo framework, so that changes after a git push, for example, site rendering via Hugo and online placement via Docker can be carried out very quickly, even within seconds. The translations are made with the free translation tool Omega T and also managed in Git, so that similar processes are also defined here. The basis of the whole project is the cooperation with our contributors. From the acquisition and supervision of the writing process to publication and accounting, each individual lesson requires a high level of organizational and communicative effort. Currently, we distinguish 3 different roles among the contributors, whereby one helper can have, of course, several roles. The author is responsible for the content of a lesson. In addition to the appropriate knowledge of English, he or she must therefore have the technical knowledge of the respective objective and prepare it in a didactically skillful manner. He or she must be able to adhere to the structural guidelines and to carry out all work steps in the given tools. The same requirements apply to the reviewer. That is why there are many contributors who take on both roles. However, since we follow the at least 4 eyes principle, according to which each lesson must be reviewed by at least one further expert, we need to distinguish between these 2 roles. The translator must not only have the technical qualifications, but also the ability to translate the technical text appropriately into his or her native language. In addition to Git, they must also be familiar with the Omega T tool. We also follow the 4 eyes principle for translation. In order to make these processes as efficient as possible, we have developed a series of documentation. We have summarized the individual work steps for each role in detailed instructions for new helpers. We call it the writing style guide, the review guide, and the translation guide. We will have a closer look at this later. A mailing list gives all contributors the opportunity to exchange information, and it allows us to easily communicate news about the project. Git, and especially the work with branches, allows us to transparently manage additions and corrections before publication. And issues and issue boards in GitLab are essential for us internally when it comes to keeping track of the project status and assigning tasks. We are working on further involving the contributors directly here. The aim of all these measures is to make it as easy as possible for the contributors to get started with the project and to work together. And when we look at the results and the feedback after almost 1 year of work, we seem to have succeeded quite well. What does all this look like in real life? I would like to show you this step by step using a common scenario. An interested person contacts us and would like to participate in the learning materials as an author or as a reviewer. The steps are the same. The qualifications are right and the contractual matters are also quickly clarified so that work can start right away. In the following demonstration, I assume that version control systems in general and Git in particular are at least basically known. So, and this is how this should look like then. In order for a new author to get started, we have prepared 2 things in advance. They have access to the project's Git repository and receive the credentials to enter this repository. And they will find a dedicated workspace, a so-called branch within this project with the prepared project files. From that moment on, there are basically 3 approaches for the text work. First, it's via GitLab. That means you log into a web interface and work exclusively with the functions offered there. Second, you clone the project on your computer and work locally with an editor or manage the files with Git on the command line. And C, you can use a comfortable editor with Git integration. And all these 3 approaches I would like to show you now briefly, very briefly, so that you get an impression on what would be the first steps if you would like to join us. So that is, you said you want join the team. We gave you the credentials. You enter your credentials here. You sign in at the, oh, cool. That was so clear that something like that would happen. That looks definitely better. So when you log in, you get an overview of the projects you have access to. That is, in your case, there would be only 1 or 2 or whatever projects. I've prepared this one. You get an overview of the project called Learning Materials Test. You get an overview of the directories and files already available. And if you want, you can work right away in this web interface, and only in this web interface. And you can do so by going directly to the repository. You again see the directories and files available. And if you know about Git, and if you listen to the things I already said, is we have created or prepared for every author his unique working space, which is called a branch, which is in fact nothing more than a copy of the main branch. And this main branch in Git is called master, where you should not work, but as I said, you should work in your own branch. And we prepared, let's take it as an example, 2.3. You enter your specific branch you have been assigned, and here you can see in topic number 2, objective 2.3, this is yours. Another directory, which is called, again, 2 is the objective, 2 is the topic, 3 is the objective, and 01 is the first lesson in this respective objective. So here you can see the text file, the only text file you will have to work on. And this is where we already prepared the structure of a lesson I have described earlier. You see the table with the meta information, you see the 6-part structure, and now you can even start editing. How this looks like, how this ASCII doc looks like, and works I will describe a little bit later. What I would like to demonstrate is you can use this web interface for your whole work on this lesson and on the topic if you want to. And as soon as you change anything, so you change the text and you not only save it, but you commit it. That is, you make this change available in the repository, in the Git repository. You can do so, and after that it's fixed, you can see it when you the commits right here. This is what I've done right now. I updated the index, and you can see the whole history of the project here if you want to. So this is what I call option 1, that is working in GitLab and just in this web interface. If you don't have permanent internet access, or if you prefer working on your local computer for whatever reason, or if you don't like web interfaces at all, let's have a look at option 2, that is working on the command line on your local machine. When you have a look at this intro page to the project, the first step you will have to do is to get a local copy from the Git repository on your local machine. This process is called cloning, and what you have to do is to use on the command line the git command in combination with the option clone and the address of the respective project. Here GitLab helps you by giving you the right address of the project. You can switch to your, oh, I guess I have to make it a bit larger so that you can see it. I hope that it's large enough. So that's where I am. I changed to the learning material I prepared, which is empty. And now I say git clone with the address I just copied, and thank God it works. So now it has cloned this whole project on my local machine, which you can see there is a new directory called LM test. When we enter this, you see it's in fact a normal directory with normal subdirectories and files. The only thing that makes it, or which declares it as a Git repository, is that hidden directory with some information. We don't have to look at it right now. What I would like to show you, we now have a local copy, the same one which lies on the server in the current status. And the thing we have to do now is the managing the different branches. Find the branch you have to work in and not mixing it all up together. So what you do is ask Git, what is my branch? Or which branch do exist and which branch am I in? So on your local machine, it can see only the master branch so far, because when you clone the repository, it gets you the master branch, if not declared otherwise. You know that we have assigned to you your working branch. It was .3. And so we have to switch to this branch and we have to check it out in Git terms. And you see branch 2.3 set up the track remote branch. That is, remote was the situation before. That was a 2.3 branch, but only on the server. We now switched, or we now have that branch locally, and we are already in it. And when we do git branch again, you see we have now 2 branches locally, and we switched from the master to the 2.3 that is our respective branch. Now, the same thing we did on web interface, we changed into topic number 2, we changed in objective 2.3, and we changed into lesson number 1. And here you find this only text file you have to deal with, and you may work like that on it. You see the same ASCII.doc file. This is what we added a few minutes ago. Let's start. Let's continue. We save these changes. And now we have the following situation. We made local changes. That is, these local changes are not known to the server, to the Git repository as a whole so far. And what we have to do right now, we have to transfer our changes to the Git server and the Git repository so that it is available to all other users. We can ask Git for a status, and it gives us the information we already knew, but now we have it red on white. We have modified this single file. What we do now, and this is what is being recommended by Git here, to make your changes known to Git, add them. That is, add means add my changes to the index so that Git knows about them. When I do git status now, you see it has switched from modified red to modified green, which means, Git already knows about it, but it's just a kind of buffer it knows about it. It has not been transferred to the server yet. Before we do this, we add, we do a so-called commit. And this commit, or the task of a commit, is to bundle all the addings we did, all the changes we did in one package. And this package of changes, because you can have changed several files and directories and pictures and whatever, and you combine all these changes into one bulk of change, and it gives you the opportunity to combine changes which belong together. Maybe you did some work on contents, that may be one commit. On the other hand, you did only some typo correction, which would be another commit. So we now change just one single file, and we can say added some content to 2.301. So now we packed this package, this commit, and the final step we have to do is we send this single package to the Git server, to the central server, so that everyone who does a clone or gets the most recent version of the repo also will find our changes. This is done by git push. And after that, we're finished. That is, the change we made should be available and visible here. Okay. See it only in this. This is what we've done. We added some content to 2.301. And you can even see in colors marked the changes we made. We just added this single sentence. So that was option 2. Very briefly, option 3, you can use whatever text editor, and even one which has Git integration, which is quite comfortable. As an example, I use Visual Studio Code here. I will just open let me see, it's not here. I'll open following. It was Learning Materials, LM Test. This is the one I would like to open now. So, and as you can see, here are already some Git special things. Down here you see we are already in a special Git branch. This is ours. So we can see our directories and files here. And we could, we can save that. And as soon as we save it, you see that this has changed, and this one is added to this Git symbol. If we click that, you can see there is a file which has been changed. This is what's called Git integration, and which makes working with the repository quite easy. You can now do all the steps we did on the command line by clicking on the respective icons. So the first thing we do is git add, that is, we add it to the index. We write a commit message, another sentence edit, we add this to the commit, and now you can see here we have to push our commit. We still have to push it to the repo. We can do so by clicking here, and after this new version of the file is transferred to the Git server and thus should be visible again here, only in branch 2.3. Another sentence edit. So these are the three approaches when working with the Git repository. The last thing I would like to show you is we have already talked in detail about the structure of the project and especially about the lessons. So you will write exclusively in prepared lessons file, as you have seen before. And you don't have to worry about the rough structure. The text formatting is done in the already mentioned ASCII doc format, which is a markup. This means that formatting instruction, or better structural instructions, are written directly into the text file using just characters from the ASCII character set. If you have never done this before, you will quickly get used to it because it is very simple and very intuitive. We have also written detailed instructions for this in our writing style guide, which every author and reviewer receives, and which I would like to show you briefly. Because it's this, yes, it's this one. So this is our recent style guide. You will find an introduction on the general concept, that is, what is markup, what is an editor, what is version control, how does Git work. Then we get an introduction to the file structure, the same we have seen with the topics, with the objectives, and with the lesson directory and the lesson file. The structure of the lesson file is explained, and then we come to the markup section, that is how this ASCII doc syntax is used. And it's quite simple. How headings look like, regular text, emphasis, URLs, whatever, quotation marks, blocks like code listings, which we have, of course, quite often. So, and every element you may use in your text is described here. You don't have to, and you should not use other ASCII doc elements which are not described in this style guide. So, I see time's running out of us. I very shortly show you the translation tool, which is called Omega T. This is how it looks like. You do the same thing, that is, you open a directory. Let's take this one as an example. That is the German translation of the English Linux Essentials Learning Materials. You see the lesson files here. You can open a lesson file by double-clicking on it. And you have to get used to this. Can make it bigger, unfortunately. Just to give you an impression. As soon as you click on a paragraph, you have the original English text here, and now you can add your translation here. It is very helpful to use in combination with DeepL, for example, this translation tool. That is, you can mark a part of text and then automatically let it translate into your language, which may serve as a very good basis for the final translation then. So that's it. So let's go shortly back to the final things. Just a very quick look at what we are planning for the near future and what we have already started. Of course, the development of further materials is in the foreground. In addition to the completion of 102, which will be soon done, it includes DevOps Tools Engineer, BSD Specialist, as well as our upcoming exams, Web Development Essentials and Security Essentials. The next area is the translation of the materials completed in English into as many languages as possible. And here we now rely on a considerable and growing network of translators, but new helpers are always welcome. I'll skip the other things we have in mind just to finish with the hint again and to give you the opportunity to ask questions. How you will find the way to us. I've already briefly described that there are 3 roles, author, reviewer, and translator in the actual text production. If you are interested, you can either contact me directly or contact us via learning at lpi.org. With the exams Web Development Essentials, Security Essentials, BSD Specialist, and DevOps Tools Engineer, we are extending LPI's original focus of pure Linux administration significantly. That is why we are, of course, particularly pleased about contacts with specialists in these new areas. Yes, and in addition to these direct text contributions to the learning materials, we are also pleased to receive many small suggestions for improvement from our readers. We have deliberately set the hurdle for such comments low. A simple email to learning@lpi.org is sufficient. This will then trigger 3 processes on our side. That is, we thank you, and that is, give you feedback that we received your comment. We convert the feedback into an issue in the respective project with request to the author or the reviewer to edit this comment, and then the notification of this change to all translators, that all the translations have to be updated then, of course. So this brings me to the end of this webinar, and I hope that I was able to give you an impression at least of the project. And if you have any questions, I will try to answer them now. I assume that Caitlin will moderate them. Otherwise, thank you very much for your interest. And of course, you can always contact me directly. Thank you.
Thanks, Markus. That was a lot of information and a lot of great information. I was able to facilitate some questions with the group throughout your presentation in the Q&A box. So a lot of questions were surrounding how to get involved more, how to translate. So I will share the presentation slides and the recording along with the contact information that people can contact learning@lpi.org or yourself if they have questions about how to get more involved. Is there any final questions from anyone? Going once. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, Markus, thanks for the very informative webinar. Have a wonderful and safe day. Bye all. Thank you.